Hey, Ozark Growers here. I'm Tiff.
I'm Kara.
I'm Seb.
Today we're going to talk about the history of farming in general, a real brief overview, and we're going to nerd out on some of that a little bit, and then the difference in the uptake of nutrients that are synthetic or organic.
So I think we can start off talking about the history of farming a little bit, and we're not going to go super deep on that, but we are going to talk about a few things just briefly in history and stuff. As you guys know, there was a Dust Bowl happening back in the day, and we're going to kind of try our best to explain what was going on there. So
what we learned in school, that quick,
brief hit
20
moment.
minutes of the Dust Bowl that was covered, and then 2 questions on the test at the end of that week of 9th grade isn't enough. We found more.
Yes.
And we're just kind of nerding out on some stuff that makes sense long term.
I feel like it connects a lot of dots and kind of helps me to understand why we've gotten to where we've gotten today.
Yeah.
So basically, a lot of new inventions were happening in the Industrial Revolution, right? So, there was business booms happening all across the country. And they decided to try to make machines, to use machinery to help them farm. So
Innovative, right?
Right,
Big
yeah,
sense.
that seemed like a really good thing. So they take these big machines and they plow their fields. And what they didn't know is that was tilling up the ground too harshly and killing a lot of the good stuff in the soil. Not only worms, but all of the microbes, or most of them. Probably not all, but a good chunk of them.
Mycelium network.
Yes,
been
the fungal
formed for
networks.
years.
Gone.
It's just out the door as soon as they do that.
So when they did that, they started losing soil fertility and soil health. And that was kind of a consequence that they didn't know of, because before that they were just using, farm animals and machinery that was not as strong as those big rototillers and big farm equipment. So,
well, another small example was they were talking about when they milled the wheat, they had used stone to crush the wheat, and then they switched to metal machinery that ground it way more fine, which is the cause of a lot of gluten problems. It's broken down so much more, and our body doesn't know what to do with all that. We're not built to know. Our body isn't built to know how to handle that.
So these are just consequences that are happening today that we didn't know was going to be a big problem. So when the soil started losing its health, that's when the Dust Bowl kind of came in. And you can go back in history and see pictures of, houses that are literally, the topsoil is depleted, and they're just sand and dust is blowing everywhere. There's tornadoes of dust blowing everywhere.
Dirt and soil are not the same thing.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
Dirt is just...
It's lifeless, yeah.
Yeah, it's inert.
It has no good life to it, and it's dry. It's not, it doesn't hold its moisture, it just floats away.
Right.
So it was just...
Right.
Lots of, you have, 6 to 12 inches of completely dry, sandy topsoil that just took off.
So people were starving at that point because the farmers were not able to provide food for them with that kind of soil.
And they
with
didn't
that
fully
dirt.
know why.
Yeah,
they didn't know.
They were doing everything.
It's
everything they were
depression.
doing, they thought it was good. These machines were helping them farm large
The work
amounts of
wasn't as
land, and
hard.
it wasn't as difficult for them to do their one job if they were a small farm and this and that.
Yeah.
But the overall consequences is it pretty much destroyed a nation, kind of.
Right.
Really.
They started having to import a lot of food, and they had soup kitchens and people lining up to eat. People were starving during that time, so they were searching for an answer. They didn't know why. They probably, at that time, they probably thought it was a curse from God of some sorts.
Right.
They were probably like, why can't we farm? And so World War II starts happening, and around that time, they had this big petroleum industry. So they found
for
out.
the war, because they were the things they were making
Right.
for the war.
Yeah,
well, then the war's
harvesting
over,
this
and now
nitrate,
they have
ammonium.
all this
Ammonium
petroleum.
nitrate and petroleum
Yeah.
that they have to use it.
Find another
they're like-
use for it to sell it. To
They
keep
find
going.
out it can grow plants. They find that out because it has nitrogen in it. So they start dumping that on the fields, and boom, it's the Green Revolution. That's around the 1960s, and the nation is celebrating because they're finally able to grow some food
farming again,
which
yeah.
is really that was a good thing in that time. It just really helped the nation with all the starving that was happening.
Right.
So they were able to produce crops again.
Abundance.
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
So what they didn't know though is that when they started using those synthetics, the plant wasn't able to create the health that it had when it was using organics, which was
When it
generations
was growing
past.
organically. Yeah.
So it wasn't producing exudates through the root system to stop other weeds from growing up, because a lot of people might not know this, but if the soil food web is intact, you won't have as much problem with weeds growing. So the plants started suffering and losing their health. They were more susceptible to disease and pests. And the way that we solved that was by creating
More
pesticides.
chemicals
Yeah, using chemicals to farm, and then you have to use the chemicals to
fight the
problems.
side effects of using chemicals.
Right. So
Correct.
with the organics side of that, farming would have been maybe a cover crop with your cash crop growing, and then you would also cycle in what you're growing per season. So maybe like a winter wheat, when it's cold outside, and then in the summer you do your regular crops that you want to do, your corn, this and that. And whenever we got these synthetic fertilizers, instead of planting a cover crop, we would feed the fertilizer and grow the plants big, and then spray something to kill the weeds and kill off all the weeds that are growing, and then not grow a different crop because we have enough fertilizer to just keep pumping this first one full so much. So over time, your soil health just keeps depleting and depleting because there's no variation of what it has, and there's nothing keeping that moisture in there. It's the synthetics, like we've said, it's killing off some things. Some things stay, but just overall, the soil was just declining and declining and declining. And because of this, you have to feed more. So after the first few years of the Green Revolution beginning, it just turned into more feeding and more money dumping into these farms that no one really understood that that's what was going to happen, but that's kind of the result.
Very true.
And
Very true.
One of the things about that is the ground isn't happy, the plants aren't happy, and because they couldn't recognize it right in the beginning, they had quit doing the things that traditional farmers did. Like they used to rotate crops on the field because different things growing in there would add different things to the soil, and the soil would take care of itself. So they didn't rotate anymore. They didn't give the land any rest because they're like, we've just created some cool things that make that unnecessary. Not so. I mean, it doesn't
We're
look
seeing
like
the
it up front,
consequences
but
today.
there are consequences today. for that kind of stuff.
And if you look at the data on erosion in the topsoil, it's been depleting for several years. And so we're not here to claim that all of that was malicious. We think that's kind of why we're giving you guys this history of what happened. We're just explaining what happened in our human history. It was the natural progression of how it goes.
They were just trying to take care of the problems they had at the time.
For sure. And so now what we're kind of trying to do is give you guys some information and hopefully give you guys an alternative to those methods that can restore the topsoil and restore health to our food, and changing several ways that we look at agriculture can help with that. And we're going to go deeper on that.
Yeah, all those chemicals that they're putting into the ground might be killing the weeds, but it's also going into the earth and
Into our water,
and turning into rain, and just respreading, and the amount of Roundup on the earth is crazy.
the generational effects of these synthetic nutrients are now kind of showing in our generation because of what our grandparents and great grandparents have been feeding. So if you're to not feed a synthetic on a field that has been fed synthetics for years, it doesn't produce right away. If you're not introducing things organically, trying to revive the soil food web, maybe you just don't even understand what you should be doing. Your agriculture, your livestock, even your own health and your family's health will deplete because of this, because you just have nothing to give the plants. There's no nutrients for them to uptake, and
Which means
it
when
forces a lot of people to use synthetics, because they don't understand what to do to save their farm. There's
and then it might take a little longer, and some people just don't have the time for
exactly.
that. You'd rather do it now and get the money now, and
it's a quick cash grab. Similar to even in the cannabis industry, sometimes living soil, your startup is a little bit scary compared to someone who may be growing hydro, but in the overall, your product is better, and over time, it's regenerative and sustainable. It's cost effective in the long term.
Right.
Whenever things like that sometimes can be pretty hard on your business.
We're here to help teach these methods of organic growing, and we want to spread that knowledge as far as it can go, basically, because we believe it's an answer to some of the epidemics we've been seeing.
Right.
Maybe not an end-all, cure-all, It's not going to save every problem that we have today, but
it's not going to eliminate all disease.
Right.
But we know it can help.
It can help for sure.
and eating chemicals all day, every day is not helping anyone's disease, anyone's current.
Yeah.
Not saying that this causes disease. We don't know anything about that, and we're not pretending to be doctors on TV either.
No.
But it can be good for you.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are growing a crop that doesn't have any
immune system,
nutrients added, then you're eating that crop.
Then
That's not
our immune
helping
systems are lacking because of that.
They're pathetic.
It's if you look at Americans, we're not the healthiest nation right now, and that's just kind of a fact. We're struggling. We're all out here struggling. We have lots of medical issues here, and that saddens me. It's not one person's fault. We can't look and
on purpose
find the smoking gun.
The evil genius.
So we're just trying to help people out here. So
be aware.
Be aware. That's kind of the history of farming and what we're talking about there.
So all of that leading us to
here's some of the good news. There are fungi and bacteria and stuff that can digest the glyphosate and help kind of transform the health back into the soil and back into the plants, which in turn comes back into us.